Welcome to Power of the Tribe podcast. I'm your host, John Connors, and my question for you is, how honest are you really with your jiu-jitsu and life? Dan, how honest are you?
I'm pretty honest.
Actually, you are. You're pretty honest.
But, like you said, people are immediately going to think, oh, I'm honest, but we'll see. We'll see throughout the course.
I think
throughout this podcast.
I think honesty is trickier than you might think at first blush. I mentioned to you that I heard Sam Harris say that he's always honest with his kids. And I thought it was a little bit of an oversimplification, right?
What does it mean to always be honest with your kids?
What is it being honest?
It's not even good to always be honest with your kids.
You can't tell your kids everything.
I'll give a quick example.
Okay.
That when my son was, 6 years old, say, I'm making up the age, but somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
And he had just found out about alcohol. Maybe it's 8, like whenever that age is. And he's like, Dad, have you ever seen someone drunk? Like, I guess you just heard about drunk. And I'm like reading the paper or something. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, I've seen some people drunk.
Caught buddy. A glimpse.
Yeah, I might have once or twice. And then there's like a pause, and he's like, Dad, have you ever been drunk? And I'm like, and at that moment, like I had always said, philosophically, I'll always be honest with my kids.
Okay.
Like Sam Harris, right? Like I will always be honest. But at that moment, you have to read the situation. He was a little boy. I looked at him. I knew what he wanted. And I'm like, well, bud, I've drank alcohol, but I've never drank so much that I was drunk. And he was like, oh, good. Like, that's what I thought. Like, and I'm like, that's all he needed at that age. He's like,
so basically
6 years old, 8 years old.
You flat out lied to him.
That was a flat lie. Well, I'm not. Have I been drunk though, John? So I'm like, maybe it was a lie, maybe not. But I'm just sort of like, at that moment, so people listening, I'm sure
he wanted to feel safe, and you wanted him to feel safe.
There's listeners right now that are like, oh, that was a lie, and it's like, if they asked maybe at 12, I'd maybe answer differently. At that moment, I'm telling you, I read what he wanted to hear, and he'd feel better hearing. And so that's what I told him. And now I'm sure he's older and he understands more.
That's interesting. As a parent, what is your greater duty? To have your child feel safe or to be completely frank with them at all times?
Yeah, like
especially at a young age of 6.
My son now knows that I'm totally honest with him. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's not like he's scarred from when he was 6.
Oh,
and
right.
Like, he goes, that was a lie, Like, at what age?
Never trust
at
you
what
again.
age? If do you talk to your 3-year-old and you'd be like, I'm pretty drunk right now? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
oh, right.
At some point, obviously, you don't just talk to your kids
You're not
with
going to
total
sit down
honesty.
with your 6-year-old and tell them about all the horrors of the history of mankind either, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, now the Holocaust, right? Like, you're like, you judge when you should share these things.
Right. When it's meaningful and makes sense, it's going to help them develop. Yeah.
I was pretty wild when I was younger. Like, they don't want to hear it. Do you want to hear it from your parents?
No.
Exactly.
I don't
exactly.
want to hear any wild stories from my parents.
Let them lie.
Yes. Yeah.
I prefer that they lie.
Yes. Yeah.
So Sam Harris. So that's part of what you're saying is it's simplifying to just be like honesty good, not honesty bad.
I think it's oversimplifying.
Right. So we're going to get into this podcast.
Have you noticed when people? Here's one of my pet peeves, Dan. I know you love my pet peeves. Sometimes people are being just sort of frank. They're just not having any candor, and they're just being insulting. And they're like, "Well, I'm just being honest."
Yeah.
And I don't think that's honesty. If I'm saying something insulting to you, and I'm excusing myself by saying, "Well, I'm just being honest," you really suck. I'm just being honest. Yeah. That's not honesty, right?
Yeah, it's not how humanity works. We could insult a lot of people,
right?
And I do actually insult a fair number of people, but like a lot more people.
Right.
Like, we're always judging what you should say and what you shouldn't say. You can't just be like, it's just great that I'm so honest all the time.
Well, I think if I'm being honest, Dan, then I have something at stake. So if I just say something insulting to you, there's no loss or potential loss for me, really, right? I'm just being insulting, and I'm being straightforward, perhaps, or whatever, frank or direct or whatever you want to call it. But if I say something to you that is technically true, but I stand to lose something by it. Now that's honest, right? Because I have a stake in the game.
Right,
Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's like a more noble version of telling the truth. Is like, yeah. So there's truth and there's honesty. So I'm being honest when I'm like, Dan, that isn't my $5 bill on the floor. You keep it. Where if I could just say, yeah, that's mine. Yeah, whatever. I don't know.
And so something hurtful. So if you're saying something hurtful to someone, you don't care about their response. That's not really.
That's
you're
not
saying
honest.
it's not
Yeah.
honesty because
Nothing noble about
it
that,
doesn't
right?
even matter.
Yeah.
Whereas you could say something like, "I think you have a problem with drinking problem. I think you're drinking too much or something." You're like, "I know it's going to piss him off."
Oh,
but
right.
That's honesty.
And it might
too,
hurt
right?
the friendship.
Yeah, it might hurt.
Might
but I think
destroy
I should
the friendship.
Do it. I think I should do it.
Yeah.
Or I think you should break up with
That's
this
a better
person or
example.
something
Yeah.
like that, right? You're like, this could hurt, but I think I need to say it.
Yeah.
You know, and then you're putting something out there. You're like,
And it could
this
hurt me. They
this
may
could cost
not
me.
want to be friends with me anymore. I
Right.
could lose something.
Right.
So that's really honesty, right?
Right.
Not just insulting people. Although we do like to insult people
Yeah.
occasionally.
But I'm not claiming it's something noble either. I'm not like, isn't it great how I always speak my mind when I'm just trash talking something?
So you know why this came up Dan this week? I had a really funny experience where we have some great students that train with us. And one particular young man, he comes in, lately he's only comes in on the weekends. And then he'll after the training's over, he'll say, "Coach, I have a couple of questions for you." And he might have like 3 questions about some positions that he's been working and his thoughts about it, and he wants my input. And they're really thoughtful, honest questions, and I really appreciate him as a student, and I'll explain my thoughts on what he's trying to figure out and see if I can help him, and he values the information I'm giving to him. And I'm like, wow, what a great, thoughtful student. And then other times I'll have some other student ask me a question, and I get a little annoyed by it. I'm like, why am I annoyed by this person asking me a question, and I'm not annoyed when that guy asks me a question? And I figured it out. And what it is, Dan, is the person I first referenced, they're like sincerely curious about the problem. They're trying to figure the problem out. And then I have other times where a student they kind of want my approval. So they're asking a question to like get esteem from me. Do you follow what I'm saying? Like you've spent plenty of time in a university situation. I'm sure you've been there where some sort of prestigious speaker comes in, or maybe it's even the professor in a lecture in the class, and then they ask for questions, and somebody goes to the microphone or raises their hand for a question, and then it's not really a question, right? They're trying to make themselves look good.
I've been a professor, and so I've experienced quite a bit. Yeah, you reach a point where that person raises their hand, and you're like, oh, you're just like, anybody else?
And they have an agenda, and the agenda isn't to figure something out, right?
To look bright or to get my favor or something like this.
Yeah, to try to shine in front of the other people. So it's like a dishonest way to get a little esteem.
So what's a jiu-jitsu
status.
example? Maybe like, what I like to do is this. Is this good? And they're actually just trying to show you a good escape or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And they're not really interested in your input or your feedback. They just kind of want a pat on the back. They want to get a little. It's natural, right? We all at times look for approval from other people, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever been there? You're unusual, but
I don't think I look for that much approval from other people.
No,
on the scale of things, but
occasionally it happens. It's human nature, right?
Yeah. Well, if I ever got any approval from anybody, I probably would appreciate it. But having not experienced that, really.
But I started to think about it.
Everyone wants approval. Like even the people out there that are like, I don't give a crap. I'm on this. I'm closer to that side of like that guy. Like I don't give a crap what anyone thinks.
Mm-hmm.
But then you do, right? Like
of course you do.
Like
it's human nature.
Yeah, I think being honest. I'll feel it somewhat. I don't like.
I think the trick
I
is to not have the tail wag the dog, not to reach too much for approval and status and esteem from people. Just try to stick within yourself and prove yourself or whatever, develop yourself, and whatever status or esteem approval you get. Great, enjoy it when it comes in, but don't bend over backwards to get it, if you follow me.
Yeah, it's almost a whole other topic, I think, because I've struggled with, but noticed it in myself years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed, I don't even know how many decades ago maybe, I was like, I am trying to get other people's approval too much.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to make people either make them laugh or trying to like, or feeling bad when they don't like what I said, or, you know, I'm like, I got to tone this down. And I actually think I did. You know what I mean? Like, but it's funny because I also felt like throughout this, you could have described me as like someone who doesn't give a crap what anyone thinks, because I was sort of like that. But internally, I noticed sometimes like even someone would just like laugh at an email or something, be like, "Oh, that was hilarious," and I'd feel like, "Oh, I'm so glad." And then I'm like, I don't like this. Like, why am I doing that? Like, I'm putting too much of myself on like what other people think.
So it's almost like if you enjoy the applause too much, then you're going to be subject to the criticism as well, right? Yeah. I totally hear that.
It's worth thinking about for everybody out there. I mean, everyone's a little different on this scale, but it's like, think about toning that down. Think about not worrying so much what other people think.
I remember in the 80s.
Except for the sociopaths out there. You're probably in a good spot already.
Kevin McHale says something like, and it's been said before and since, I'm sure, that you're never as good as the praise or as bad as the criticism that you're getting. And, you know, try not to lean into either one too much. It's probably the best approach.
That's a good approach for this podcast, actually. For
what do you mean?
The feedback we get from the public. We're probably not as good as...
We generally get positive feedback. We had that one guy that unsubscribed from YouTube, and not only did he unsubscribe, he commented. He said, unsubscribed. We never figured that out, why he unsubscribed. I didn't really bother to ask him.
Theories.
I think our main theory was you were critical of, what's his name? The football player who
Michael Vick.
Michael Vick, yeah.
Was that episode? I've lost track.
It was that episode. I think he might have been a Michael Vick fan. And you're a dog lover, so you came down hard on him, rightfully so.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Some people just, they don't like that.
Yeah.
But then, you know, the people have gotten furious over saying, like, Bruce Lee couldn't win an MMA fight against today's UFC fighters. And
Dan, did you see that movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? Is that what it's called? You saw the movie?
Yeah.
So, believe it or not, I watched most of the movie over Rory's shoulder on a plane ride, on a flight, and I didn't listen to any sound because he had his headphones on. So I just saw the images. And ever done that? It's actually kind of interesting. I'm trying to figure out, I don't know what Brad Pitt is doing here. What's going on? And it's actually a visually beautiful movie. I don't know if you realize that. He has these color schemes where sometimes it's all in a yellow tone and other times it's all like in a blue tone.
I didn't notice.
Really cool.
Probably with headphones on, you don't notice.
You probably don't notice that. But they made a big deal about the Bruce Lee scene, right? Where he's acting kind of arrogantly, and then there's a scuffle, and he gets thrown into the car.
Up, right,
yeah. But
people got mad, right?
They did. But when I recently watched the scene, he didn't really get beat up. Like, he was still in the fight. It just ended.
Yeah.
And like, he was a little arrogant, but he wasn't over the top. I mean, it didn't seem that unrealistic to me.
Bad,
yeah. I was like, that might
people are ready
like
to get offended, right?
And plus, it's fiction. He's just, I
don't have that's also, I don't have heroes like that, like Michael Vick or Bruce Lee, or, you know what I mean? Like, there's no celebrity that anyone could insult that would make me like, how dare you insult this celebrity, you know?
Yeah.
Someone says Tom Brady's not the greatest, and I'm not like, what is the greatest? I'm like, whatever. Who cares?
But I was thinking about that. If I go to my jiu-jitsu training and I'm looking for approval, that's got to be a major distraction, right? Like, if I 100% go in there to solve the problems that jiu-jitsu presents to me, and this applies to life as well, then I can apply 100% of my energies. If I'm 50% of me is trying to get approval and affirmation from people, and the other 50% is trying to develop myself and solve the problems, I'm just way behind. Am I not?
Yeah. And it's hard to do. Like a lot of the things that we talk about on this podcast, it's hard to do. It's hard to try to downplay seeking approval.
Right.
Because it can just pop in whether you're...
It's human nature. It's how we're wired, right?
Yeah.
we're afraid of losing status. We want to gain status. So that's essentially the same thing as approval. So we're just tapped into that. We're always looking for that.
And just to be clear, we're not saying bad, but like if you're saying don't seek out the approval of you or the other upper belts or whoever, doesn't mean be rude to them or like obnoxious to them. Or do you know what I mean? It's not like I'm not seeking your approval, so I don't give a crap what you think. That's a totally different thing, right? We're saying
I'm just thinking if you're leaning into that too much, it's probably a distraction.
Yeah.
And you're probably inhibiting your own development a little bit, at least, if not a lot, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's people that will really blatantly will like tense up if you know, because of that. They're like, oh, John's watching and now I can't do the move.
Oh, right.
And, like they're just it can really affect their performance.
Well, that's common. That's even a slightly different thing, right? That's even harder to deal with, right?
Yeah.
But if you can figure that out, not be afraid of making mistakes in front of your instructor, that's probably really good, actually. Because otherwise, you shrink your game to not make mistakes. So lately, I've been doing a lot of positional training. I have this, I don't know if I mentioned it to you last week. I have a match coming up on June 5th. It's sort of like a super match where it's a 15-minute submission-only match where if there's no submissions, we go into overtime EBI rules. And in the overtime, you start in a submission position. So it'll either be back control or they call it spider web where you sort of have an arm lock. So I've been doing a fair amount of that training this past week in those positions. And it's really hard, but it's been really kind of refreshing because sometimes you just get tapped because you're starting behind,
Right.
And it's been good. So I've learned so much. I've already made huge improvement, but I've probably tapped more this week than I have in a long time, maybe ever in a week, know? And it's liberating because if I go into training to minimize how many times I get tapped, if that's my goal, that's got to definitely inhibit my development.
That's big in jiu-jitsu too, right? Like,
in what way?
Just people really struggling to not tap instead of just focusing on learning and or feeling terrible because they tapped. I did it too. I was like, I can't believe I got tapped by this newer student or whoever. Like, I suck. And like just the whole sort of the theme that we talk about a lot on here, like getting in your head in a way that's not productive, basically. Sort of like instead of going, what happened? How did he get me? It's more just like, I suck. And
well, that speaks to the whole honesty thing too, right? Where, so you have to tap. So now are you going to come up with excuses why you tapped, or are you going to try to honestly figure out what you need to do differently next time to minimize the chance of getting tapped again, or figure out how to get out of that or how to defend it?
Because there's always an excuse, right? You're always tired, or you're always just came from a workout, or you always just had a rough roll
I did
right
squats
before
yesterday,
it, right?
for God's sakes.
Yeah, right. There's always something, or it's like, oh, they just came in and I've been here for 20 minutes. There's always some reason, or like, definitely. Well, I kind of gave him position on this, or you know what?
Yeah.
Earlier in the roll, I actually just gave up I let him pass, so that like there's always something.
Right.
Not always, usually something.
Or you could always come up with.
I wasn't trying my hardest, and then I was going 80%, and they went 100%, or whatever.
Which is sort of being dishonest, right?
Yeah. All these are somewhat dishonest. Or it's also I probably could have got out, but I just felt like tapping. Like I didn't want to, like if.
And all these things could be legitimate.
Yeah, they could all of them could be.
Yeah, yeah.
But wrestling with them is what's wrong, right? Is down the wrong path.
I think being dishonest with yourself is probably the most dangerous thing, right?
Yeah.
Like when you're just bullshitting yourself, that's not great, right?
Yeah.
That's where you go down that slippery slope where things could go off the rails. That's how all these wacky no-touch knockout martial arts start, right? Where people are just dishonest with themselves. Then other people come along and they buy into it. They're like, oh, we're pretending to be knocked out. Okay.
Right. And the more obvious point is like being dishonest with anyone else sort of obviously is not a way to go. Like,
right.
If you get tapped and you start saying to everyone around you in the gym, well, I'm tired and I just did squats, and like, that's obviously not going to go over well. Like, I think that's
But I think
for
it sort of
itself,
starts with yourself, right?
Right.
If I'm dishonest with myself, Dan, then I'm almost forced to be dishonest with you, right? I can't be honest with you and dishonest to myself, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Very. Yeah.
Yeah. That's where it starts, sort of, right? So you just got to kind of suck it up and be honest with yourself, and then it just simplifies life, and then I can be honest with the people around me. But I thought that was, I had never thought about that until this week, this idea of like somebody asking a question that's really not even interested in the answer. You know what I mean? They have a whole other agenda.
Yeah.
And I don't even think they realize it when they're doing it, right?
Yeah. And yeah, did it happen to you this week or?
Yeah, I noticed it. I was like, why is this bothering me? And I started talking to my son, Rory, about it. He's a pretty sharp guy. And then we figured out, we're like, oh, this guy legitimately wants to know the answer. This knucklehead is just trying to take up time. They're like trying to get FaceTime with you.
There's different reasons, right? Like just want to, get
they
some
want to
time
connect
with you.
Yeah.
Or trying to, wants to show something that they think they're good at. I've seen that before.
Oh, right.
Where they're like, what do you think of this escape? And they just want to show they think something good. Or
they want some little pat on the back. Yeah. But they don't really want your input so much, you're saying. Yeah. That's tricky, right? Because it's probably a mixture, too. They sort of do want input, but they really want the big pat on the back, right?
Right. And even there, that's when the key thing is honesty, right? Because if someone wants a pat on the back, but they're kind of honest about it, they're sort of like, hey, I think I know a pretty cool escape.
Yeah.
What do you think? Like, it's sort of honest, at least. Like, it might not annoy you as much as like a pretense. You know what I mean? Hey, I want your input on this, and then you feel they don't want input.
They don't want input. Yeah. No. Yeah. Yeah, but that whole concept, I've never thought of that before. I'm like, I've been in this world for 58 years, and I didn't even realize that was a thing. I guess I sort of thought it was, but now I see it. I'm like, oh, wow. And the people who are just honestly asking questions, they're progressing way faster than the other guys, you know? So when you're looking for that pat on the back, you're probably just hurting your own development.
Don't you think it depends? Well, maybe that's true of all advice, but I'm just thinking there's certain people, and we could name them, that it's very natural for them to sort of come in and quietly learn as much as they can.
Definitely.
And other people, it's going to be harder. It's like they're like, like I'm not sure I was really, I'm more ready to joke and ready to sort of have fun there. And I'm not even saying it's bad, but I think it would take more of an effort for me or a lot of other kinds of people to like really focus in and be like, I'm here to learn. I'm sort of not here to socialize. I'm here to, not as my primary thing.
Right.
Because again, we've said this on the podcast before, but people openly say often like, my main reason I go is to socialize. And as we said, it's a whole other topic I don't want to get back to, but as you pointed out, I thought it was really interesting was it's not, if you come in to learn, the other things are better for you too. Even socializing is better. I
totally agree. Yeah.
Like, the reasons that you list for why you want to come in other than improving at jiu-jitsu, those are more enjoyable if you focus on improving your jiu-jitsu.
I think so. Yeah.
Right. Like, even if it's like, no, I don't want to, I just want to socialize. It's like, you'll socialize more if you're focused and you're improving your talking technique with people.
Yeah, because you'll feel better about yourself.
Yeah.
People who respect you more, you'll respect them. You just have...
And you'll talk to them. You'll be socializing as you talk through the techniques. And
yeah, the socializing, that's pretty much going to happen anyways, right? Yeah. That's how we are as animals. We're the most social animal on the planet. So that's definitely going to happen. You don't have to... I mean, especially jiu-jitsu, you're literally strangling each other. It's like you can't avoid each other. It's not like you're going to go on a subway and just put your head down and read a book. Like the jiu-jitsu doesn't work that way. Yeah. You need at least one other person. So that's my big idea of the week. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I mean,
I think another way you could be honest with yourself. I think the key is
being honest with yourself. Like, right? Like it's something. I think people hearing the intro to the podcast might be like, "Yeah, I'm honest," and you immediately think to others, like, "I'm not lying to everyone." And I think the key here is a little different. They're all of a piece, but it's being honest with yourself.
Right.
And what's the advice, though? if people are not being honest with themselves, do they know they're not being, like, I feel like I always try to monitor it and I try to be as honest with myself as possible.
That's a great point.
So I don't know if someone's not honest with themselves. Do they know they're not being honest with themselves? And you know what I mean? Like,
I think they do at some level. Most people.
And they're probably going to write an angry comment to us after this podcast.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't want to deter any of my students from ever seeking me out for feedback or even a pat on the back, because they almost all deserve it anyway, so they're welcome to it. But I just realized that distinction. I'm like, oh, that's something different going on there. I think if you're not being honest, it's probably because you feel you're not safe to be honest. Like you can't risk being honest. You know what I mean? You're not in a place for whatever reason where you can be secure enough to be honest.
Right. And because I'm thinking now, there's people I know that are never honest, like with themselves, and like, you know, like it's just they're chronic, and it's weird.
It's
like,
weird,
you know what I mean?
Like, right? Yeah.
And then some of it's demonstrable. I'm sure you've been in the weightlifting community. There's people that, and I haven't, but even I know people that are like, just say how much they can lift, and they can't. Right? Like, you know what I mean? They're just like way off from what they said. It's not like, oh well, I'm having a bad day.
Fudged it by 10%.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like what are you doing there exactly? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's like you're just, and it's not like they're like shifty eye going, oh yeah, I can, like, it's, you know, it's almost like they've lied to themselves, and at the moment they're saying it to you, they almost believe it.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
That's some type of personality thing going on there, right?
Yeah.
Where they just are very comfortable communicating that way.
And I'll tell you a side point of that. I think if you're dishonest with yourself, another negative outcome is you start thinking other people are doing it too.
Oh, right.
Like you think other people, you just assume everyone's dishonest.
Right. We're all driving
you know
10 miles over the speed limit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I think. I think people that are like, especially if you're chronically dishonest with yourself, other people are being honest, and you're sort of like, yeah, I don't believe him.
He's a bullshitter.
Yeah, exactly. Because they just think that's what everyone's doing. You know what I mean?
We're all
it's
doing
like,
it? Yeah.
Yeah. Like, aren't we all lying? And it's like, I got news for you. We're not all lying.
We're not.
Yeah. But you also, sorry to back up a second,
yeah.
I think is important for the gym that, like, you're not saying, I'm going to reemphasize that people shouldn't come talk to you and try to, like, because that's happened on this podcast before, like a misinterpretation of what we're saying. It was one where, like, I was saying I was getting irritated with people that, like, if someone's brand new and they compliment me when we're rolling, like I pass the guard and they're like, oh, good job. I'm like, what do you mean good job? Like someone like on their second week. And then we get feedback. Someone commented like, wait, I compliment people. And I felt like when I read it, I'm like, well, I didn't mean you. I meant, you know what I mean? I didn't mean someone that I gave a specific example of what was annoying.
You were
me.
talking about a narrow circumstance, not a blanket.
And I think that's
thing.
true here, right? You're saying if someone is calling me over under sort of a dishonest pretense of why, that can irritate you. But you don't want people to think like, apply broader, like, oh, I was going to call John over, but apparently he gets, you know.
And the reality is, saying it's dishonest is pretty harsh criticism. It's really not. It's human foibles, right? And I just mean it's probably not the best approach. Like, you'd probably be better off just sincerely looking to solve problems in your jiu-jitsu and life
that's another good point, because people might get, it might sound so harsh to be like, are you calling me dishonest?
Right.
And that's sort of not. Dishonest is more like the direct lies to people around.
Right.
Dishonest with yourself.
A robbery. You're not like sticking a gun in somebody's ribs and taking their wallet.
Dishonest with yourself is more subtle. Like, you might not even know you're doing it.
I think so.
So that's a good point too. It sounds too harsh. So before everyone starts yelling at us.
Yeah, I'm trying to develop a culture at the academy, Dan, where people feel secure enough that they feel they can be honest with themselves and others. You know, I had an example of it the other day where one of our students, who's really good at jiu-jitsu, a great guy, I won't mention his name, and he was like, oh, I was really tired. I didn't get enough sleep, some kind of weird situation. And he goes, I was hoping so-and-so wasn't coming today because the guy's such a challenging role. He goes, oh, and then he came in. I was like, but he rolled with him anyways. But I thought it was admirable that he could admit that, like, a little bit of a weakness. Like, I was really tired because I didn't get enough sleep. And I literally was hoping that so and so didn't come in. You know, he was glad when the guy did come in and he got to roll with him, but you know, a part of him was just saying like, "Hey, maybe today would be great if I could just take it a little bit easy."
Fair enough.
Yeah, but he was honest enough to admit it, which I was actually really impressed by. It was like that takes a lot of sort of self-esteem that you can go, "Yeah, I was hoping that I wouldn't have to go with that guy," you know.
And that reminds me of that earlier we were saying you can make all these excuses for why you got tapped, and I think you pointed out already, but we'll reemphasize that like. We're not saying that's not true. We're not saying sometimes people aren't. You're not tired.
A lot of times you are tired. Yeah, definitely.
That's all legit. And also, you reminded me. I used to have that way back when I used to tell stories before I even did jiu-jitsu. I was at the boxing gym.
Oh, right.
And there was a guy whose car would be there, and I'd pull in and I'd be like, "Oh no!" But it was sort of legit, I think, because I'd totally be like, "He's going to beat the crap out of me."
Yeah.
So that's another thing for jiu-jitsu. Like you might have a tiring roll, but you're not going to get bloodied up.
Right. You're not going to lose brain cells probably, right?
Yeah, you're not going to get literally beaten.
Yeah.
So
that's the thing about jiu-jitsu. If you really think about it, what do you lose? Like in boxing, kickboxing, MMA, you're losing brain cells and maybe you could break bones in your face or your teeth or something, right? In jiu-jitsu, really, you're only losing esteem. You're only losing status, right? Like you're really not. I mean, I just a training. I don't know if you noticed, my nose is all scraped up and red today. Like,
not.
But that stuff will happen, and maybe you'll get hurt, but for the most part, you're just losing a little esteem, a little status, right? So tonight, Gordon Ryan is competing against Vagner Rocha. They're both really top guys, but Gordon Ryan, you know, he's like very confident and, you know, trash talks and all that. And a lot of guys don't want to compete against him. And I find it interesting because if I competed against him, he would just, you know, either arm bar me or leg lock me or rear naked, whatever he decided to do, he would do to me, but he wouldn't hurt me. You know what I mean? Yeah. It would be maybe he could make me miserable by smashing me before he submitted me. But he's not going to knee me in the face. He's not going to kick me in the head.
A trip to the hospital, most likely.
Probably not at all, unless you really resisted.
Yeah.
Like one of his matches, he had the guy on the inside heel hook, Mateus Denise, and he just basically looked at him and the ref and waited. He was like, he can't get out. And then the guy just said, "Yeah, all right, you got me." So the guy was like winded, you know what I mean? So literally, you don't really have a lot physically to lose, but you have sort of that social status to lose. Which I think if you approach things in the right way, you don't want that to be that painful. You don't want that to be a limiting factor, you know?
Yeah. And as always, we sometimes make a small nod to outside jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. And this is a really good one. Being sort of honest with yourself outside of jiu-jitsu too is huge as well, right? Like what's going on in your life and your relationships and your job and everything else. Like
I agree.
I don't think So is there a downside to being honest with yourself? I mean, maybe it can sting. Like if something is more your fault than you've been, you know, maybe it's a safety blanket to be like, that wasn't my fault. Like, or, you know what I mean?
Interesting. I'm trying to think of when it's a drawback. I think
it could be protective, right? You could be like, well, I couldn't help that for something if you did bad behavior.
Oh, right.
You know, and you're like, well, that wasn't my fault, really. You know.
But then you're liable to do it again in the future, probably. So I think in the long run,
and it probably eats away at you too, right? You're sort of somewhere deep down know it was your fault. That's the thing about, I think, being dishonest with yourself. I think you always sort of know what the truth is, and it eats away at you.
I think so. Or can you like turn the honesty on and off like a spigot? Is that possible? Like I kind of feel like once you start being dishonest with yourself, you're losing touch with reality, right? And then it's going to creep into the rest of your life. That's probably not good. Yeah, I think it might, like you said, it might sting in the short term, like ripping off a Band-Aid, but I think in the long term, it's got to be the better approach, right? I mean, what I tell my students and my athletes is, you know, to be confident, of course, and expect to win, and go out there, and you know the universe will set your limits for you. if you say, yeah, I want to get to this certain level, I want to be this certain amount of champion, and you put all your preparation into all your hard work, and then the universe will tell you, actually, you're not world champion caliber, you're this caliber, you're local champion caliber, or whatever the hell it is. And then and then you have a decision there, like, do I accept this, or do I try to fight back and get to the next level? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. I also think there's still this step that's difficult where you have to realize, I'm sort of saying, how do you address whether or not you're being honest with yourself? It's almost like you have to sit back and think about it in some way, like,
definitely,
am I kidding myself?
Yeah.
So maybe
you have to be reflective. You have to be introspective, right?
Right.
Definitely.
That's what I guess the suggestion of this podcast, right, is to try to think about that and be like, am I being honest with myself? And whatever.
I think so. I think it probably helps not to get too giddy about the pats on the back and the compliments and the positive esteem you're getting from people. Like, whenever I get positive esteem from people, I try to mute it a little bit, not get too carried away, because I think when it goes the other way, you're just going to, you know what I mean? You're just going to feel the downside even more if you lean into the praise too much.
Right.
And
if I ever get praised, I'll bear that in mind. So now I'm ready. If I get some positive remark my way,
Dan,
I'm
I think
prepared.
you're considered a solid number 2 as far as the host of this podcast.
I'm in the second. Yeah, that's good. Top 2.
You're in the top 2.
Dimitri's looking a little skeptical. He thinks he's in that second spot.
Yeah. So, I go probably once a week, and I train with the great Mark DellaGrotte at Sityodtong. And the beauty of going over there and training with him is I'm so free of any teaching responsibility. I just go in there, and I'm a blank slate, tabula rasa, and I'm just like, all right, man. And I'm honest. Just tell me what I need to do and where I need to improve. And I think if you can get that point of being honest with yourself, it's very liberating. It frees up a lot of energy.
And even in that example, you said you improved basically in that area, because I remember you gave the example of, he'd say shadow box, and you'd be like, let me just throw jabs or something where I know I'll look okay.
You didn't want to look stupid. Yeah.
And then you were like, what am I doing? Like, that's not what I'm here for. Let me do the stuff maybe even that I'm worst at, so that he can see it, and then he can help me.
Yeah. It comes back to this theme that I've been pushing for the last maybe year or so of, if I put development at the forefront, it makes everything else easier, and everything else sort of falls into place,
And being dishonest with yourself will interfere with that.
Absolutely, right. And if you put development first, you don't have to be dishonest so much, If the most important thing for you is to gain the glory, to win the esteem from people, now, it's a plus-minus game. Development is like, it's almost a purely win-win situation. It's like, I just want to develop myself. And it's really hard to lose from there. You know what I mean?
What do you think about this? Is this the same thing? Because I think a lot of people might. Is there a form of being dishonest with yourself where you're overly critical of yourself, where you're just like descend into like, I suck and I'm miserable and I'll never get good at jiu-jitsu, and this.
Well, I would say that's a form of dishonesty as well, because it's not realistic. And then that may be some form of a defensive mechanism, some sort of defensive device. I'm not sure, because if you're truly honest, you'd be like, well, I'm pretty good. I'm not as good as I want to be. You wouldn't say I suck. That's once you get into that sort of subjective characterization, then it's not honest, because it's not objective enough, right? If you're like, I would like to be a lot better at my guard attacks, and I'm not good enough. I don't like how what level I am there.
Yeah,
That's
I'm trying to
honest.
think what it is. I think, say you're like, my guard sucks. It's defensive in a way, right? Because you're like, now it doesn't bother me anymore. You know what I mean? I just suck. You could do for all jiu-jitsu. I suck at jiu-jitsu. It doesn't bother me anymore. It's over. The struggle's over.
Yeah.
I suck. I'm not struggling to be good
And I
anymore.
relieve myself of any obligation or responsibility.
Yeah, I
to
can't
improve.
get good.
Yeah.
I can't get better.
That's being
The
dishonest.
fight's over.
Yeah, because everyone could get better.
And that's
Everyone
why
can improve.
that's probably why it's done, right? That's why I've done it, right? Like where you're just like, but I didn't analyze it until just about now, right? Where you're like, that's probably why you do it, right? To just be like, I can relax now. It's over.
Take that burden off my plate.
Yeah.
Definitely. Not good.
And it's another form of dishonesty, right?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely.
It's not just me. I think a lot of people do that, where they're just like,
Absolutely.
either I suck overall, or like this part of my game sucks.
Yeah.
Or this outside of jiu-jitsu again. You're just like, oh, I'm just terrible at that.
Well,
and then you're
it
done
reminds
with it.
me of that. You must know this guy, Martin Seligmann from UPenn, psychologist. He came up with, he calls it explanatory style. So it's like the 3 Ps. So personalization, permanence, and pervasiveness. So if you say, oh, I suck at jiu-jitsu, now you're making it personal. It's like you suck, instead of saying, oh, my jiu-jitsu could be better. I want it to be better. And then permanence is like, yeah, I completely suck. And I'm never going to get any better. That's permanent. And then pervasive is like, I just suck at sports, at everything.
At everything. Yeah, there are different levels.
Yeah.
That's what we always, I remember you saying this a long time ago, like to try to keep it at that level. Like you can just say like this guard attack is bad. I'm bad at throwing up the triangle, and then deeper and deeper, like my guard sucks. My jiu-jitsu sucks.
Yeah.
I'm a terrible athlete.
Yeah.
I suck at everything.
I'll always
always suck at everything.
So you want to do the
like,
opposite. You want to make it impermanent, non-pervasive, and impersonal. Right. So it's not that I suck. It's just that what I'm doing right now isn't as effective as I'd want it to be. Yeah.
Don't let it spiral.
Yeah.
A bad triangle attack to like, I suck.
But it leads to the question, why do people do these 3 Ps that Seligman talked about? And it probably just removes the burden of working on that anymore. Like, oh, I'm done with that. Yeah. Which, if somebody wants to be done with something, that's perfectly legitimate as well. But it'd probably be better to be honest and go, you know what? This is the effort it will take for me to get good at this is not going to be worth the benefit of being good at this. So I don't want to do this. That's
honest.
Yeah,
right.
That's reasonable.
Yeah,
yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's hard to be honest, I guess, Dan. Yeah, but I think it's ultimately, if you can get there, very liberating. Yeah, I feel like I'm moving more toward that, and it's good, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, like everything we always talk about, it's a constant process, right?
It's a constant process, Dan. That's the other idea I was thinking about the other day. You could look at everything in life as being iterative. In other words, it's just, you have a relationship. You date somebody and you have an experience, and then maybe date somebody else and you get married, or maybe you get divorced. But it's iterative, and like you could kind of get better at being a romantic partner every time if you looked at things that way, like a learning process, an iterative process. You could get a job someplace and screw up somehow and get fired, and you're like, okay, but I'm going to get another job. Next time I'm not going to fall asleep underneath my desk. You're going to just figure it out.
I'll show up sober from now. But again, that process will be badly interrupted if you're not honest with yourself.
Oh, right.
If you're right. If you're like,
right, that's essential, right?
Well, it didn't matter because the boss hated me anyway, or
right.
I didn't do anything wrong.
Oh, right.
My spouse was a bitch, and you know what I mean. You're
right,
like, well,
right.
And might be some truth in these things, but like
right.
if you don't look inward and you kind of kid yourself,
right,
it'll stop the improvement.
But if you look at everything honestly and everything as an iterative process of development, then you could probably deal with some pretty subpar experiences and learn from it and move on and be in a better position in life, right? I don't know, Dan. I think that's about as good as this podcast is going to get right there.
Yeah, so, we'll learn iteratively. Next one will be better.
Our next episode is going to be better for sure. So everyone, please subscribe. I think half of the people on YouTube that listen to this aren't subscribed. Shame on you.
It's one click of a button, isn't it?
One click. You're being dishonest.
And it doesn't also, I don't think it hurts anything, right?
Doesn't hurt
It's
anything.
not like you get tons of notifications and all this stuff.
Probably no notifications, actually. Probably once every few months. So please subscribe. and tell your friends about us. Thanks so much. Good luck to everybody, and see you next week.